Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to this special pre-conference event of the World Adaptation Forum. At our international launch of these books and the panel discussion. For me, it's an honor to be here on the stage with two iconic figures of collapsology. Ginie Servant-Miklos, whose bold new book may reshape how we think about education in times of collapse, and Raphaël Stevens, one of the co-founders of the concept of collapsology itself. What's fascinating is that these two books were published exactly 10 years apart. The first, How Everything Can Collapse, feels even more relevant today than when it was first released. The second, Pedagogies of Collapse, is so honest, it almost hurts. But that is exactly what we need if we want to move from awareness to real action. The Hungarian edition of these books became reality thanks to 3 months of super intense work. Now that we finally hold them in our hands, I'd like to say a few words of appreciation. First, to Erika, our copy editor, who made the text truly beautiful to read. To Tamás, our proofreader, who carefully made the text truly beautiful, paying attention to every detail to the perfection. To Anna-Marie, our typesetter, who gave the book its clean and elegant layout. To Dora, our graphic designer, who once again created wonderful, adorable book covers. To our editorial team, Zita, Ági, Dori, László, Gábor, Péter, and Ádám. And of course, to Ginie and Raphaël, thank you for writing these books and for joining us here today. So let's turn now to our first panel, which is titled The Challenges of Teaching in a Time of Polycrisis. Ginie Servant-Miklos is an environmental educator and assistant professor in behavioral sciences at Erasmus University, Rotterdam. She developed the experimental pedagogies framework and authored Pedagogies of Collapse, which explores how education can remain meaningful in a time of profound crisis. Raphaël Stevens is an eco-consultant and an expert of socio-ecological resilience. He's co-author of How Everything Can Collapse, a groundbreaking book that helped introducing the concept of collapsology. His work focuses on collective adaptation and the tools we need to face ecological and societal breakdown with awareness and resilience. So, please come on the stage, Ginie and Raphaël. Well, I guess now you can see as well. I will direct my questions, each of them to one of you, but please feel free to jump in and refer if you have anything to add to any of my questions. I know, and I really follow the rules, ladies first, but if you don't mind, we'll stick now to chronology. So I would start with Raphaël. Your book became the source code of collapsology. And it covers many areas like resources, economy, finance, modeling. If you were write it again today in 2025, would you structure it the same way, or would you anything change on it, or even the focus of it?
Good question. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here, happy, and discover this beautiful city. Thank you all. Yes, we really wanted to write a book that we wanted to read, in fact. In 2015, when we write it, we thought that it wasn't a transversal book that talks a lot about complexity. And we had this idea to weave all the different subjects together so that we can have the largest picture possible about this subject. To answer your question, today I think many things change in terms, probably about energy first. We know a lot more now than we did before. In 2015, for instance, it was just the start of the shale oil, as they do in the United States with our horizontal drilling. And so we thought that it would be, the decline of oil production will be steeper than it is now, in fact. So maybe we can just a little bit revising this. And but all in all, the climate, I think the climate question is even worse than we think it was at that time. So it's clearly accelerating, and it's clearly more frightening in terms of food production, for instance, of flash floodings or droughts everywhere in the world. So it's going quicker than we thought. But one of also a thing that we didn't think about at that time in 2015 is the resilience of the financial system. In fact, we learned now that the financial system learn a lot about systemic risk, and they find ways to circumvent all the systemic risk from the banks. You know that the banks, they lend a lot of money and they share a lot of risk together. And so when there is one bank that can go down, then the others can also suffer a lot. And now we know that, in fact, these banks are much more resilient than we think about. And so maybe we thought the collapse would come from the banks, but maybe not. Maybe the collapse will come from food production because of climate change, because of biodiversity loss, and so on, from the ecological side, in fact. Even we thought about the ecological side a lot in our books, a lot. But now maybe the ecological impact is much worse than we think. We thought it was for maybe the second half of this century, but it's really happening now.
I see, and I can't resist to make a personal note, because probably no one else cares, and that's okay. But over 5 years ago, when I made the mistake to make a literal translation of collapsologists and call myself one, I was one of a clown in Hungary, and it was a real struggle. Sometimes still is. But now I feel absolute satisfaction that the father of collapsology is sitting next to me. So I'm really glad for it. But Ginie, as I mentioned, there's exactly 10 years between the two books. And while translating yours, I didn't help to notice it, that you actually refer Raphael's book. What kind of other resources you had, and anyway, how did you get in touch with the whole idea of collapsology?
Yeah, so I was sharing that anecdote where we were signing the books. I have a bit of a complicated professional background. I used to be a human rights lawyer, and I did several missions in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Caribbean, and I was on a mission in Vietnam that went particularly wrong, where I got to see firsthand the consequences of war, particularly chemical warfare. So I was on an Agent Orange project in Vietnam, and that went really catastrophically wrong. And then I realized that human rights is the wrong end of the question. By the time you get to victims of Agent Orange, something's gone really wrong upstream. And then I reconverted and focused my attention on education as a means to prevent egregious abuses of human rights and wars. And I became an education psychologist focused on cognitive psychology, particularly looking at innovative ways to teach. So I was working in the psychology department, did my PhD in the psychology department of Erasmus University. And my daughter had just been born when I was offered a postdoctoral study in sustainability education in Denmark. And I said yes because, I don't know, I'd just given birth and, I said yes. I went to take up my position, and then I opened the IPCC report and I went, oops, this is not good. And then my cousin, who had been interested in this field for a while, said, have you read the book by Pablo Servigne and Raphaël Stevens? And he sends me links to the book, and I get the book and I read the book. And then I fell into a very deep 2-year-long depression. And it was during COVID as well. So it was just around the time I read it, I think in 2019 or something. And then came COVID. And all these things that they were talking about that seemed quite abstract, suddenly it hits you in the face when COVID arrives. And you're like, no, actually everything can end. Overnight, everything can change. And then I realized all these things that they're talking about, that's not even my daughter's lifetime, that's my lifetime. And I also followed the works of Jean-Marc Jancovici, of Cyril Dion. I listened to Aurélien Barraud, but he's very depressing. And
the French ones.
Yeah, all the French. I am French, by the way, for those who were wondering.
The homeland of collapsology.
And then I said, it makes me depressed to listen to a lot of these things. And they're right, of course. The facts are there. The science is there. But I needed a more psychological angle to understand why, one, we haven't done anything about it, even though we know since 1972 about all of these things from the Club of Rome, the Meadows report from the Club of Rome. And two, how can we tap into psychological mechanisms and particularly pedagogies to get ourselves out of the depression, to even if we fail, even if some kind of collapse is inevitable at this point, how can we still find the strength to get out of bed in the morning and go and work on this? How can we, especially for young people, how can I face my students and tell them, yeah, so basically all the world you know is going to collapse and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, I might as well not be a teacher then. So I teach the stuff that's in your book still, but I add a whole extra layer of emotional processing, of understanding how our brain plays against us, how our emotions try and shield us in quite toxic ways, and then teach new forms of engagement so we feel at least like we have some agency over the future still.
Just because I know there are a good few teachers here, I may ask you, given how fast our world is changing literally day by day, what changes do you see coming for education in general on the systemic level, if you see any?
Yes, so I think I was the first person to use the energy foundations of collapsology. I particularly worked with the works of Jean-Marc Jancovici in this regard, to give a fossil fuel-based analysis of the education system as we know it. And to relate, so we all know there's universities and there's more schools for trade colleges, and it's very divided and segregated. That is because, and I work in the Netherlands, if tomorrow there's no more fossil fuels, then we're going to have a hell of a lot of unemployed financial consultants in the Netherlands. That's because of a globalized market. We export a lot of financial advisors and bankers and Deloitte consultants in the Netherlands. And we have fewer and fewer people who know how to mend clothes, grow food, the basics of survival. So how I managed to get out of this depression is by building my own school, which focuses on the Danish concept of Bildung, so forming the person, and persoonsvorming in Dutch, a whole person approach, and concrete skills to survive. And one of the things I did to get out of my depression is learn how to grow food. My grandmother was a cotton mill worker, and she made all her clothes herself, so I went back with my sewing machine, and my husband can tell you, I occupied the living room for a while. And that's where education has to go if it wants to survive and stay relevant, is giving people the tools to survive in a world without fossil fuels and work together in solidarity. And so my schools don't only focus on the skills part, but also on building communities across specifically class divide. Working class people from the Rotterdam South, which is the poorest working class neighborhoods of the city, working together with university students on an equal footing. Because there's a lot of school projects where university students go and mentor poor working class kids from the South. I don't do that. Those kids have way more useful skills, and I wrote this in Pedagogies of Collapse. Collapse will not be kind to the manually inept. And so those kids that I have from Rotterdam South, they are tailoring students. They know how to use a sewing machine. They are food, horeca in Dutch, so restaurant business students. They know how to cook food. So they have a lot to teach to the university students who are doing philosophy degrees, and nothing against that, I did one. But it's not enough to survive what Raphaël wrote about in his book.
Well, you know, translating a book, especially two, has its own challenges, because in a way you write a book, because if there are some jokes or sayings which are obvious for the native speakers, have to be not just translated but rewritten so the people will understand in the other language what originally the writer meant. But there was at least one expression I decided to technically leave untouched, and that was when you were gazing out at the window, looking at the city lights at night, and came to a conclusion: we're fogged. And I thought that's better to leave it as it is. Well, Raphaël, kind of a time capsule. It's been 10 years. So since you introduced the idea of collapsology with Pablo, and that's a long time to living with this topic. I know, with my colleague, we know even 5 years is sometimes long enough. But it must brought challenges and losses as well in your way. And if I may to ask, do you have any personal strategies to cope with these challenges and the obvious emotional weight raises from this struggle?
Yes, so talking collapse is obviously very emotional. Brings a lot of emotion, anger, fear, etc. There is a lot of this emotion. Sometimes they're going and then they're coming back. It's a treadmill, really, a merry-go-round. Okay, it's up and downs, up and downs. Some people, perhaps me, might have a capacity to read, and especially my strategy is to read only scientific PDFs, files, right, articles. So that's kind of giving a distance, right, because it's a scientific vocabulary, sentences that are really, sometimes you have to think twice to understand it pretty well, right? And so I try to be, you know, reading this scientific literature might help me, but that's my strategy, I mean. And then the second thing I do a lot is meditating. I try to meditate every day, and how I do it is through improvising music. I'm an amateur pianist, and so I try to improvise a lot and to be in the present, right? Not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past, but just be present. And it's kind of opening up a lot of different things after the meditation. And it's, yeah, helped me to be quiet inside, to find calmness, right? And so that's how I do it. But I think everybody has to find a way to cope with his or her emotions. Right?
I think Raphaël and I have like opposite coping strategies. So I'm working on a new book now, which I will hopefully be publishing with Bloomsbury as well, in which I talk about my coping strategies. So brace yourselves. The title of my new book is The Left We Need, Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll, and Climate Justice for All.
Nice. But in the meantime, at least to stick to this book, I know that you put special emphasis on love and being in the present. There was a show with a crazy guy. We do it every second Wednesday, and at the end of it, I just made a quote from the book that as you were in the kitchen and you were listening to the raindrops on the glass window and then see the beautiful flowers in the sunshine, and all what you hear from this as the moment tells you that that's enough. And I believe probably that's a way you can find your peace while facing all this disturbing reality.
So that's, you refer to the passage at the end of the book. It was pumpkins, not flowers. But
I'm not a gardener.
Why that moment was important for me, and I think that is I wasn't alone. I was looking at school children. I live in the Netherlands, so there's a cycle path that goes in front of the house, and all the school children go on their bicycles through that. And in that moment, as I talk about in the book, for the last 10 years, I have been, I built a charity, a foundation, the Fair Fight Foundation, that provides, we started out as karate schools for girls from the slums in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and India, and progressively we built out for education scholarships to high school and to university for those girls. And that moment was special for me because when I saw the kids going by on their bicycles, I thought about around this time the girls would be walking home from the school in Zimbabwe, and I thought about the girls would be coming home from school in India as well. And that moment was special because I realized how much love there was built over 10 years with those girls, that even though I'm not there right now, they're still here with me. So it wasn't about the flowers and the pumpkins, although I definitely have had very special moments with my pumpkins. But it was about all the connections that I've built through love over the years. And that's a very core concept of the book, in Imperfect Solidarities. It's about willing, despite the fear of loss. So if you want the tragic end of that story, 3 weeks ago, my team was arrested and deported from India, and we were forced to close our program in India after 10 years. And I was there, and I had to say goodbye to girls that I've known since they were 7 years old, forever. I'm never going to see them again. And I had to say goodbye, and it was profoundly sad, but also there's no regrets there. And it rose for me the question, in times of collapse, we try things, we want to do things, but there's a high chance they're going to fail. And so the question I asked is, when all else fails, what are we left with? And it's that experience. The question is, did we make each other's lives better in the 10 years that we had together? And I do think the answer is yes. And it's that love that I carried with me on that afternoon. It's not the pumpkins. It's what it reminded me of in terms of human connection and actually the meaning of life. And I don't read PDFs so much, but I read a lot of existential books, Simone de Beauvoir being my ultimate muse. For me, it's really, what does it mean to be human? How do, like, if everything's going to collapse, what are we left with? And I think ultimately we're left with each other. And we better learn how to live with that.
Well, I will word my sentences carefully because there's quite a good few scientists here. But with my colleague, Jort, one of our favorite part of the book was when you said how much time and effort you put writing those scientific articles and make sure they were good and they get published, publish or perish. And the moment that you realize there's like so many more things in life more important than this, and you just stopped chasing it. So my colleague told me that make sure you put it in your next scientific article, and I try to do so. But of course, only after when I'm done with what I have to do. In your book, Raphael, you strongly emphasize the importance of mutual support in difficult times. But looking at the world today, do you think that sense of solidarity is increasing, or on the contrary, it's decreasing?
I think it's both. It's at the same time it's increasing, and at the same time it's decreasing. So I think we live in a paradoxical time, almost as if we were in a quantum theory or quantum physics, right? You cannot see the particles, or when you see it, the other one sees something different. So it's very paradoxical, and that makes things very difficult to observe. So I would say that, you know, I see in my neighborhood that, you know, there is some increasing solidarity. People are relating to each other. When COVID came, we had a good lesson. We stick together. But then the question is, how long can we, you know, take this solidarity in the long run? That's the difficult thing. So we know that when something breaks up, there is always people coming together. But then when things, you know, in the longer term, things start to fall apart slowly, right? And one of the key points is to try to maintain or to sustain this solidarity, and that makes the things very difficult. I don't think, I think nobody has a good answer to this, but we have, there is a, how can I say that? There is a good, you know, a good side of it. When things fall apart, we see that people like to get together and be present and be with their love for each other. There is plenty of example in the literature. I mean, you'll see that sociologists, for instance, have seen that when an earthquake strikes or whatever calamity strikes, there is always people coming together. The more you are in the center of the catastrophe, the more people are sticking together. And that's a very positive thing, and we have to think about that positively. Try to focus on that, and we might find a way out like this. So yes, I do hope. It's a hope. It's a kind of being optimist in this pessimistic landscape, right?
Well, I think realistic is probably the right
or lucid
word.
one, yeah.
But you're right, because lots of studies show that in short-term crises, people will become very supportive with each other. That if once it gets prolonged, weeks, months, then it just gets raided, and self-interest becomes more and more.
Yeah, it's
important.
a question of time, and then there is a question also of geography, right? It's about the local people. They know each other, so they stick together. But maybe when you go out, it's more difficult to maintain this solidarity. So we have to learn about it and recognize that there is some opportunities there. And there is a way out. I mean, humanity or human people are very, that's social animal, right? We are a social animal. So we know how to stick together. We know how to share. We know how to being together. But sometimes we lost it with modernity. We lost a lot of skills of being together. When you can, everybody can cook on his own, right? For instance, we lost a way to how to share food together, for instance, and maybe we can learn it back very quickly. It's because it's all in our genes, right? So modernity distract this, and maybe we can turn it up and show a better way, as we did before.
So I'm afraid we will have an opportunity to test it.
Right.
But, it was about 12, 13 years ago that the German Bundestag ordered a study, and they were wondering, once all the public services, especially electricity, is gone for a longer period of time, then how long does it take until the society starts to break up? And they came to a conclusion, and as an average, maximum 2 weeks. And the big question really, what happens then? Because I believe we will all feel the lack of electricity or heating, not to mention food or water, but the real division between our beautiful new world and a very different world is when the state power over security, I mean, like police forces, will decay, and then probably there will be crimes without any punishment. And that's a big turning point. And I genuinely believe, I tell it all the time, and I think it will be an excellent turn on Ginie, that a culture can be very well described how it deals with women. And if you're looking around on the planet, we can find all sorts of. But it's unfortunately not only me, but a lot of experts share that when all those modernity rules we live by, the fact that we have to pay a price if we commit a crime will be gone, then one of the first things that will disappear is respect towards women. So I cannot encourage enough women, children, elderly people, weaker people to learn self-defense and try to protect themselves. And I'm so glad that it was massively included in the book, and especially that we have the expert herself here. So I would like to ask you at that point that what do you, as a woman and as a person who has experience from the global south, what challenges women face now and probably in a collapsing world?
So I have direct experience of collapse because, as I said, my foundation has schools in Zambia and Zimbabwe. And about 2 years ago, it stopped raining in Zambia. And the Kariba Dam dried up, which accounted for 90% of the electricity of Zambia and Zimbabwe. And so Zimbabwe is actually quite used to collapse. They've had, this is their third collapse in 20 years. So the Shona people are some of the most resilient people I have ever met on the planet. They really, they've been through collapse so many times that they really have all these parallel systems of coping. This is very interesting to compare what happened in Zambia with Zimbabwe. But what I saw, so the industry stops functioning. I was talking to a man who ran a factory where they produced ice. And I said, well, why don't you put solar panels? And he says, because it would cost more than the profit I would make from selling the ice. So the best thing for me to do is shut down production until it rains. Well, I have to say it has rained now, so you have floods. But they had 2 years without production. And so what happened? It's very interesting. Women in these countries got together in communities, and you see these bonds of solidarity between the women, specifically in the communities. The community leaders I have seen there are all women. And I say this, it's an inside joke between me and some of the women I work with in Zimbabwe. It's like, if you want to get something done, you have to ask the women. What I saw, which we were talking about it this morning, I was not prepared for this consequence of collapse: drugs. So we all have this idea that if something terrible happens, there's a collapse of society, we might get together in solidarity, try and address the situation. What I hadn't anticipated is the extent to which economic collapse pushes men in particular to abuse drugs. In the US, it's fentanyl. In Zambia and Zimbabwe, it's crystal meth. And crystal meth has this peculiarity that it turns men very violent on the come down. So the come down on crystal meth is quite bad. And in the girls in my foundation, some of them are suffering from crazy domestic abuse from family members that are coming down from crystal meth. It turns men into monsters, and you can't reason with a man that is coming down. So all this idea of love and solidarity and things, it's their brothers. It's their husbands. It's like these are the people who are supposed to love them, and they're high on crystal meth to deal with the despair of collapse. And for me as a psychologist, this is the most urgent problem. So yes, you may laugh that there was drugs included in the title of my book, but I want us to talk about drugs, because the life expectancy in America decreased because of drugs, because of opiate overdoses. Society's falling apart in Zambia and Zimbabwe because of crystal meth, or muturidiro as they call it there. And that is a consequence that I didn't see in any collapsology book talking about how people would turn to drugs to cope with the despair of collapse. And also alcoholism. My God, the alcoholism in Zambia, the amount of people dying on the roads because they drink and drive. So you have a perfect storm. The roads don't get repaired because there's no government finance for it. So you've got really potholes all over the roads. There's no public lighting because the power was on. Sometimes we would go 3 days without any power at all. Like imagine, it's 37, 38 degrees. There's no aircon, no power, no street lighting, nothing. There's like, the rich have their like backup solar imported from China, and it costs $5,000 for a basic backup system with just the lights and maybe the fridge. So you can imagine who can afford that. Oh, and the electric fence to keep people out. And so people are driving while drinking in dark roads with potholes, with cars that are 25 years old. So you can imagine how well that's going. So I've seen this firsthand. So what I have seen, though, is that the women are being much more proactive in organizing themselves. So a lot of the men actually leave the country and like literally just abandon their families and go to South Africa. And the women are left alone to fend for themselves. So they have, like, the women build communities, look after each other's children. I've seen some great women-led organizations to like during the neoliberal era, for instance, there was an insistence from the IMF that these countries had to grow cash crops for exports. And some of these women are coming back and going, no, actually, maize was never supposed to grow in Southern Africa, so they're bringing back finger millet, which is the traditional crop of those places. And they're doing this through women's solidarity networks. I have never seen fiercer community activists there than the women. And yes, I teach karate. We have karate schools, but let's not pretend that a girl who's like 5 foot, 4.5 feet can tackle her brother who's coming down from crystal meth with a green belt in karate. Like, that's just never gonna happen. Even me, who's been practicing 20 years, would struggle with that. So that's not why we do it. The best self-defense is spotting a dangerous person and like not being around that dangerous person. And we do that by having women mentors that can hold space for the girls. It's like, how did we get the girls out of that situation? By having women they could trust to talk to. We work with nuns, we work with teachers, we work with mothers, we work with community leaders, trusted women that other girls can come to admit I'm being abused at home. And then I can come in and say, you know what, and we've done this several times, put girls up in boarding schools so they're safe from their own family members. That's self-defense, way more than a black belt in karate.
Wow. Fair Fight Foundation and you worth this. So yeah, I hope there will be more and more like you, because I personally am a big fan of women, and I would be devastated to see them going down in this way, because unfortunately there's less and less gentlemen in the world, and that's a problem. So I hope we can find the ways that women will be able to care for themselves and each other and defend themselves.
But I'd like to ask you both, because you're both men, what are you guys, like, what is the male perspective on this super toxic masculinity that's coming out of, as society collapses, this super macho Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, Trump kind of persona?
I mean, it's, for me, it's just a symptom of collapse, in fact. This authoritarian and masculinity at this highest level is just a symptom of collapse, of course. A civilization, or I might not say civilized, but I mean a genuine society would have, would be inclusive, right, and respecting each other, whatever they are. So I believe it's just a symptom, yeah, right. And it's a sign that we have to fight in a way to resist it. But how to do it? It's starting locally. It's starting with us, in us. So a lot of male like me, we have to work on ourselves, right? To open our hearts and find a way of being inclusive, really.
Well, my opinion is simply that we as human beings, we just push things way too far, always. And if I see something wrong or done wrong for years or centuries, instead of finding the balance somewhere in the middle, the reaction in many cases is just push way too far, and then, as we say in Hungarian, we are on the other side of the horse. And that will obviously piss off other people. And this is very hard to find a balance this way. But personally, I think the world would be much, much better off gathered around female values and all that principality coming from them. I would be happy to live in a maternity world, in maternal world, because if women are the boss, then probably, okay, it comes with a price, I understand, I know that, but it would be a much more, not even say human, because this anthropocentric view was a bit too much, but more life-centered, and I think that's what is really important at this point, that the only way to save ourselves is to drop this very old attitude that there is the mighty God up there, we are here, the most wise species on planet, and everything else, all the plants and animals down there, are their only purpose is just to serving us. So it should be the life, it's what we praise and we protect. And who else is more credible about protecting or even giving life than women? So yeah, I believe that would be the way.
But how can men talk to, especially young men? A lot of people said when I was signing the books that they had sons. So how can men like you talk to younger men about collapse to stop them from running after, you know, savior father figures? We'll talk tomorrow afternoon about phallic technomagic, which is a core theme of my work. I don't think we have time for flying phalluses right now, but I promise tomorrow. But like, how can you talk to young men? Because I talk to women, obviously, and some young men come to me, but I kind of feel like they need male role models to walk them through collapse.
That's exactly what I wanted to say, for lead by example. But that's what we lack of these days, positive examples, and especially good father examples to look up, and how you live gentlemanly, because it's nice. It's nice to live that way. Well, we are among each other, so we can be honest. I don't see that this is going to an ideal direction. So all I believe is that we can do what we can for ourselves and for our immediate environment. But and I even remember, Ginie, that you referred to it in your book, but Raphaël and Pablo's book was centered around a really cool example, the car. And you compare our situation being in a car we can no longer control. And if that car is now speeding downhill from a mountain road, where would you say we are now? Still on the road, half off, hanging over the edge, flying?
Yeah, this metaphor was an easy one, as our modernity is built on cars and on oil, obviously. So we are running off of oil, even if we are plenty now, but it's still running off. We have something in our head that blinds us. We have a foot on the accelerator, especially with artificial intelligence, which is one of the main threats now as well. It's a big collapse, I would say, collapse topic. Artificial intelligence might lead us to a real difficult situation, obviously. And so, yes, the environment, we are off the road now, and there is a fog everywhere. So we cannot see what we were doing exactly. We are far off from a safe trajectory. So, yeah, the question is how to put our foot on the brake and to slow down. That's a big question for me, and that leads us to the degrowth movement. So how to have a better life without growth, without economic growth.
Do you see this happening?
I don't see it happening at all.
Do you see it's realistic?
It's an idea, right? And we try to do it individually, and we have to do it collectively. Obviously, it's not happening, right? But there is plenty of ideas, and as you said, we have to lead by example. So I try to do my best, showing my kids how I do it. Showing, for instance, coming here from Belgium. It took me 18 hours by train, but I was happy to do it, right? And so I try to do my part as I can. My son asked me, why you don't take a flight? And I explained to him. It was a good occasion to explain to him why I don't do that. And he understood. He has 10 years old, so he could understand pretty well. And I'm happy like this, you know. I try to find simple things, simple explanations, and find a way in degrowth. Right.
Well, that's a perfect point, because then I would ask you now as parents, because for from the deep adaptation group and even outside of it, the most requests are coming from parents and teachers. Now that I understand, now that I think I'm emotionally capable of dealing with it, how do I tell it to my children? How do I tell it to my students? What should I do at this point? So I wouldn't mind if each of you could have a little message and support for those people who are in these shoes.
Shall we do it chronologically?
No, just being, I think it's a question of being what you are, you know, try not to hide or to fake it. We have to tell the truth. You know, the young people, children especially, want the truth that's coming from you, your truth. It's not a question of big truths, everything. It's like this, the reality, I know the reality. No, it's your truth, and you have to be genuine in giving this message to your children. If they ask questions, just answer it as you can with caring and loving. Just the way I do it. Have a lot of questions from young people to adolescents to young adults. They ask me a question and I just try to answer with my heart, right? And that's the only thing we can really do. And in sharing our truth, right?
It's not an easy question. Like, I'm not going to say that I have the answers to that. And it also depends on the age. So obviously, we don't talk to our daughter who's 8 years old the same way that I do to my students who are, say, 16 to 25 years old. I always try to accompany the message with ways of coping. So I teach very much with embodied learning, with mindfulness practice. I actually teach karate, dancing, music, and art within the Bildung Climate School and within the courses that I teach at the university to help students. I can't just give students this message and then walk off and go, good luck with that, because during COVID, we had a number of suicides in my faculty from young people, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. And I thought, you know, I can't teach this stuff without giving them some way to process that. And that's why all of the pedagogies, everything that I teach is 1, focused on emotional processing, 2, focused on community building and solidarity and being together, and 3, focused on concrete, tangible action. Is that going to stop collapse? No, but it does give meaning to the moment of being here. It gives the students something to be there for, a way to see that, yes, actually my life could be meaningful. It's so funny, I had a university student who came to me, he's like, Mrs. Servant, does that mean I'm going to have to use my hands? I was like, I'm afraid so, my dear. But I remember I had this student who, she just was so angry with me in the class. She was just like all her anger, and at some point she just starts crying in the class. And the week after, I brought her my book on microgreens. It's like gardening, but like the sub-zero level of gardening where you grow things in pots like small greens. And I gave her my book. I was like, here, I don't need it anymore. You can have it. And she emailed me, students often email me like months after they leave my class, that she was one of the leading activists in the climate movement in the university now, from that gesture of going, here's a first step. Now, let's get up and go.
Well, I hope those who are concerned will be able to use some of these advices. Here towards the end, I want to mention that there are 2 authors here, but there are 3 books here. Because a couple of months ago, we came out with an amazing book in a similar topic called Teaching at Twilight. And I absolutely highly recommend it to, first of all, teachers, but also parents. It's an excellent entry point because it won't push you with lots of data and facts. It helps you to emotionally digest their situation, literally holds your hand and walks you through this. The writer comes to the conclusion that he believes that teachers have the task to make significant change on this through younger generations, but also educate technically everyone. Do you share this approach, Ginie? Do you think that teachers at all levels of education have a special role in this process?
I do. That's why I wrote the book the way I did. I chose to address my book as a kind of love letter to educators, no matter what level you teach, no matter whether you're like a tutor or a sports coach or a teacher of anyone who has tried to help somebody learn, basically. That's the essence of humanity, right? That's the thing that made humans special, was the capacity to share knowledge. Collective learning was one of the defining features of humanity that helped us overcome adversity. This is our greatest moment of collective learning. If we fail at this act of collective learning, we are actually going to die, all of us. So never has there been a greater need for everybody to learn to become a teacher than now.
Well, I have to tell you that there's actually a board game coming with this book, and I will use the opportunity that we are physically in one space, and I will discuss it with Ginie. So I hope within foreseeable amount of time we'll be able to come up with it in Hungarian as well, and that will be super cool and exciting. So
the board game is available for open source because it was funded by the Dutch government. So it's available open source in English for now, for those who are interested.
Yes, and we can share the link. However, we always have to keep in mind this is Hungary, and if you really want to reach the people, you have to help them understand. To close this discussion, let's now hear a special message from Ahmed Afzaal, author of The Teaching at Twilight, a book that asks what education really means in a world that's falling apart. Please pay attention.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Ahmed Afzaal. I'm a scholar, teacher, writer, and coach. I was born and raised in Pakistan and have lived in the US for more than 25 years. I teach in the religion department of a small liberal arts college, though I have a rather broad range of interests beyond the academic study of religion. Now, the reason I have been given this opportunity to talk to you at the World Adaptation Forum is because I happen to have written a book dealing with the intersection of socio-ecological collapse and education. I feel honored and gratified that the book is now available in Hungarian and that it is being launched today alongside two other closely related books, both of which I have read and admire as important resources on the topic. As for the World Adaptation Forum, I celebrate the fact that it does not promote unrealistic optimism, that it is providing a platform for those who are willing to face reality without seeking refuge in denial or distraction, and that it is dedicated to promoting clarity, courage, and a commitment to meaningful adaptation. These are exactly the qualities the world needs today. I titled my book Teaching at Twilight because twilight is the period of transition from day to night and from night to day. It suggests an ending, but also hints at the possibility of a new beginning. What is ending today is our modern civilization. That I know for sure. What will emerge in its place? I have no idea. If you were to ask me, why is modern civilization breaking down? Why is it ending? I would respond that this is because of the fatal flaws deep in its foundation. Modern civilization is ending because it requires continuous exploitation of all life, both human and non-human, because it is based on the intensification of the worst aspects of human nature and the suppression of the best aspects, because it necessitates escalating violence, both direct and structural, because it is genocidal and ecocidal in its very constitution, and because it has now committed the ultimate transgression of violating planetary limits. In the book, I focus on what might be called practical ethics, which deals with the question, what shall we do and how shall we live? A wise man once said that this is the most important question for human beings to ponder. The question is always important, regardless of what is going on in the world. But it has taken on a particular intensity and urgency at the present historical moment. If you and I agree that we are living through a time of transition, a time of collapse, a time of ending, then it is critical that we ask, what does this mean for how we act in the world? Part of being human is that we are forced to choose our actions thousands of times every day, and there is no way around it. We may have no power to stop or reverse the ongoing collapse, but that does not mean that we are off the hook. A person with a terminal illness who has only a few months to live is not entitled to do whatever he or she wants. Morality still applies. The imperative to make good, beautiful, life-affirming choices remains relevant all the way until the last breath. In the same way, living in the age of collapse does not absolve us of our moral responsibility. If anything, it intensifies that responsibility, increasing the urgency of the question, what shall we do and how shall we live? In teaching at Twilight, I've tried to apply this imperative to the domain of education by asking, given that we are living in a time of collapse, what type of education do members of the younger generation need? What type of education will help them face the challenges that are inevitably coming their way? And why is it that educators are still teaching as if we were living in normal times? Knowing what we know about where the world is going, if we continue teaching the way we have always taught, ignoring the implications of the ongoing collapse for what we do every day in and out of our classrooms, refusing to fundamentally transform our practices, then we are effectively rendering our life's work meaningless. And there is nothing more tragic than dying a meaningless death at the end of a meaningless life. I am truly grateful for your attention, and I hope you have a meaningful and transformative gathering. Thank you.
Well, probably my favorite part of Ginie's book, roughly, it says, the church gave us a vague promise that our sins will be forgiven, but the collapse ensures us that all of our actions will be forgotten. I hope it won't apply for this evening. Thank you very much, Ginie and Raphaël.